Welcome to Unit 2, Ancient Greece, Section 4, Victory and Defeat in the Greek World. In this section of notes, we're going to be looking at the ancient Greek world and kind of what brings about the Greek world's destruction, what brings about its demise. But before that, we're going to look at what made Greece such a spectacular place, such an impressive place. So we're going to be looking at those different topics today in Section 4. This will also be the last section of notes you're going to do. You're going to notice that I didn't highlight information. What I'm hoping you guys are starting to see how you've progressed through your note taking is that you are going from the teacher has to tell me everything that has to be written to you understanding how you can summarize slides. That you can get a lot of the information without writing every word, but you can just simply summarize it and get the same information. So let's look at our objectives. Our focus questions stay the same. Hopefully you're starting to see through our reading of Homer and Herodotus how we can take different accounts of different things historically and really make a good opinion about it. This is going to serve you in the future as you are going to consistently, as American citizens, be bombarded with different stories and news agencies, and you're going to have to be able to make up your own opinion. Stand firm on what you believe. So hopefully you can be able to do that. Now, objective 1, what was the Persian Wars over? What are the Persian Wars and how did they work? Objective 2, how did the Greeks defend themselves from the Persians? So how did the Greeks respond? And the last one, what is the Peloponnesian War about? Kind of what started the Peloponnesian War, who was successful in the Peloponnesian War, and what ultimately happens to Greece. Okay, that's going to be kind of our objectives today in this section of notes here. So let's talk about the Persians. Now, if we look at the different world powers at this time period, what we're going to find is two real world powers. And the first world power is going to be the Persians. The Persians have a huge empire spanning all over Asia Minor, going over into the east and going into even parts of like North Africa. It's a huge empire and they're incredibly successful. Remember, the Persians were one group from the Mesopotamia area that we looked at who were very successful because their government practiced a certain policy that allowed them to be, their subjects to really actually be okay with Persian rule. Remember what that vocab word was? It's tolerance. So the Persians are very tolerant of the people that they rule over as long as the people pay their taxes. Really, the Persians will let the people keep their own culture, let them rule and do what they want. However, if you fight the Persians are ruthless. They have a huge military and they are definitely wanting to grow their empire. Greece, on the other hand, is the world power in that part of the Mediterranean and that peninsula. They have we talked about Athens already, have a very thriving government, lots of good education, lots of great knowledge is coming about, but they're not, while they're very strong, the problem with them is they're not united in the same way that the Persians are. Remember, at the end of the day, if you're Greek, being Spartan or from Athens, being an Athenian, are two totally different places, two different city-states. So let's look a little bit about what happens to the Persian War. The Persian Empire was the absolute most powerful empire in the Mediterranean world. And it's really a shame we don't talk about them more. We should. They were ruled by several different kings, but one of the most important kings was King Darius I of Persia. He wanted to seek revenge on the Greek city-states for insulting him. Now you might say, what did they do? The city-states would meet the demands of Darius, meaning Darius said, hey, pay me this money and we'll leave you alone. Except for Sparta and Athens. Sparta and Athens start growing, they get bigger, and so they kind of feel like they shouldn't have to pay these taxes to the Persian Empire anymore. So they say, no, we're not going to pay you. This insults Darius I, and he is not going to be happy about it. Athens is going to throw Darius a message. They're going to take Darius's messenger, who came to Athens, and they're going to throw him into a well, and Sparta will take a messenger and throw them into a pit. So they're not very receptive. They offend Darius. These messengers, in all accounts, should not have been harmed. They should have been able to come. And again, like, don't shoot the messenger, right? Don't throw the messenger down the pit, down the well. But anyway, they do. And this is going to make Darius furious. So here's what we're talking about. Here is the Persian Empire right here. Okay. Now you might be thinking to yourself, this is modern day Turkey. Didn't the Trojans, were they from here? And you would be right. Yes, the Trojans were from here. But that was in the Mycenaean age. This is significantly later. Okay. Now here's the Greeks, okay? We have Athens right here, okay? And then we have Sparta right here. And look at, there's all sorts of other city-states. Now these city-states had been paying the Persian Empire, but Athens and Sparta say we're not going to anymore. All of the ones that are in this color, this kind of like, I don't know if that's light blue or green, but they're all neutral. They don't have a part in it. Macedonia, Thessaly, all of these ones, they don't really have much of a desire to be in between the conflict between these two. So they are very neutral states. Then we have what's called the Ionian rebels, okay? And we're going to be talking about them here in a second, but they were on the shores of the Persian Empire, okay? So the Persian Wars are going to start in about 500 BC, okay? About 500 years before Jesus Christ is born in Athens. We're going to see the Athenians are the wealthiest and most successful Greek city-state. So when we think of Greek culture and we think of the Greek style, a lot of that is coming from Athenian points of view. The Persians had conquered a huge empire from Asia, Asia Minor, clear over to India. So they own a huge empire. It's very, very large. The Persians had control over the Greek city-states of Ionia. And the Ionian Greeks start to rebel against the Persians, and they are going to send a ship to Athens, or Athens, I'm sorry, is going to send a ship to them to try to help them. So if we look at back at this map, who are these Ionians? This is Greek rebels who they live here, and then the Persians came and took over it, and the Persians want to control them, but these guys don't like the Persians, so they decide that they're going to rebel. They're going to try to get rid of the Persians. And Athens says, hey, we want to help you. You guys are not in Athens, but you are ethnically related to us. You are Greeks. And so here's some ships to help you fight against the Persians. You can understand why Darius gets really, really, really mad, right? So what we really have is a couple of different ways that we can travel. On the one hand, you can have the Persian Empire come up through the Mediterranean past the Aegean Sea and over to Athens and Sparta, or there is a land route that goes this direction and crosses over this strait and goes through Thrace and Macedonia and down into Athens and Sparta. But these are the different examples or the different routes that they will be fighting, okay? Again, here's another picture of those maps. Another way they might travel is they might start up here and then they'd come on boat and then they'd hug the coastline until they got to the areas that they wanted, right? There's going to be some battle scenes at Marathon. That's where we get the race Marathon from. There's going to be some right side out of Athens. And then we're going to have Thermopylae, which is probably one of the most greatest examples of fights, okay? So these are areas that are settled. If you see these lines right here, these are areas settled by Greece. This is the route that Xerxes took, which is a Greek soldier, and here is the Persian army that walked this way around, okay? So again, you can see they're playing to their strengths. The Persians, largest, strongest army, but not the greatest navy. The Athenians have a great navy, but not necessarily the greatest military. The Persians, again, own all of Asia Minor, so this is hard to see here. This would be modern-day Turkey. If we came down lower here, this would be like Jerusalem, the Levant area. This is what we call Asia Minor, Saudi Arabia, all of that area, going through then Iraq, Iran, and they own land clear over to India. So in Athens, the problem is you got lots of land, but it's all really separated by water, and it's kind of sporadic. In Persia, you've got one solid piece of land that's all kind of together. So let's talk about Marathon, probably one of the most famous examples as well, most important battles. So Marathon is going to be a time where the Ionians are going to be in a rebellion, and the Persians are going to come in response to this rebellion, and they're going to crush these rebels, right? Darius first is absolutely furious because Athens is trying to help these Ionians, and so he decides he wants to take revenge. He sends this gigantic force across the Aegean Sea to punish the Athenians, okay? He landed near an area called Marathon. This is a place that's near Athens. It's north of Athens, and you can guess how far north it is of Athens, at about 490 BC. So he lands there, and when he lands, what ends up happening is a person runs from Marathon to Athens to warn the Athenians that they're going to be attacked. Right? The reason it's called Marathon then is that Athens to Marathon is literally 26.2 miles away. That is the distance of a marathon. That's where the race came from. It's running the same distance that this person took from Marathon to Athens to warn the Athenians. Now the Athenians find this out. They go to the neighboring city-states of Greece and they say, hey, we need your help, we need your support. But few of the city-states want to help the Athenians for a couple reasons. One, the Athenians have been jerks over the last couple decades. They're not nice. They think they're the best. They definitely tout that they're the smartest and most cultured. And so they're not really eager to help them. On the other hand, too, they don't really love the Persians, but they've already paid the Persians. They have guaranteed, peace with the Persians. So why start something if you already have had to pay money for it? So again, Marathon, the Greeks sent their fastest runner. His name was Phidippides to carry home the news of the victory. He sprinted 26.2 miles from the battle site to the city of Athens. When he arrived, the rumor goes that he rejoiced and he said, "Rejoice, we conquer," and then he died from exhaustion. So he goes to warn the Athenians to get help, to be successful, and he ran so far and so fast that he ends up dying. Okay? And the marathon race is obviously named after him. Okay? The Persian War is going to be significantly bloody. The Persians outnumber the Athenian forces by a significant amount, and so they have the upper hand when it comes to that. The Athenians ran toward the Persian army, but the Persians had these new weapons and new styles and strategies they used. They're archers, and they really just started massacring the Athenian line, and they're going to just devastate the Athenian population. Now, the Athenians will be successful in pushing through the Persian line, but it's going to be a really, really hard battle on both sides, and the Persians are going to be a little bit overwhelmed by how hard the Athenians are fighting. They are dedicated. They're fighting for their lives, right? So the Persians will hastily retreat back to their ships. This makes their Athenian leader, Themistocles, who knew about the battle and victory at Marathon, and he only had come because he had seen that success there, and he was coming to fight temporarily in this fight. So he's not like a long-lasting guy who's here to fight for a long time. He's only come to do what he needs to do and then kind of get the Persians back and then go back home and quit fighting. Thermopylae urged Athens to build a fleet of warships. So he says, hey, I'm telling you what, the Persians are not done here. They are going to come back. They're going to come back with revenge. They are super mad that you beat them. They're embarrassed by it. They are supposed to be the greatest army in the world, and you guys defeated them. You need to build a lot of warships. Darius does get back. He has this major plan. He wants to get revenge. He wants to go back. He wants to kill and attack them all, right? But Darius is going to die before he has that chance. So in about 480, Xerxes, Darius' son, is going to send a large force back to Greece in the hope of revenge. Athens is going to have some support this time from some city-states. I think that a lot of city-states realize that maybe Athens could defeat the Persians. The Persians are going to land in the northern part of Greece, and a small Spartan force is going to be helping the Athenians and guarding this narrow passageway near Thermopylae. So if we look back at our map here again, we have the first battle, which was at Marathon right here, 26.2 miles northeast of Athens. And then we have this other battle that is up here, this mountain pass. You can see kind of the mountain range right here. Xerxes with his men come over here. They're trying to pass over the mountain range, and the Spartans who have agreed to help the Athenians in Thermopylae try to hold them off. Okay. Okay, this area in Thermopylae was led by a guy named Leonidas. They were heroic. The Spartans fought incredibly valiantly, but they're going to lose ground to the Persians. They're ultimately not going to be able to beat the Persians. There's too many of them. It's too much. So while they fought incredibly bravely, they're not able to actually beat them off. Okay, so here's another map of this. This kind of demonstrates, this is more of a map of different lines and different groups. Here, this yellow one is Xerxes, who we've been talking about, right? Him coming up through the coast and then down by Thermopylae. Thermopylae would be right here in this mountain pass, and Athens would be over here, right there. There's Marathon, right? And here is Sparta right here. Okay? So after defeating the Spartans, the Persians marched south, and then they burned Athens. Now, why on earth did they do that? Well, they were really, really upset because they didn't come back and defend the Spartans. So the Spartans felt like, you cowards didn't come back and help us, and we lost all these men, so we're pissed. And so they decided to burn the city. Now, the city itself was empty because the people had withdrawn to go somewhere in safety. The ships that were built by Themistocles lured the Persians' navy into the narrow strait of Salamis, and the Persian fleet was defeated. So there was this strategy here. This is the Athenians trying to use their brains in order to defeat the Persians. And what they did is they took their fleet, right? They lured the Persians into this very narrow strait, again, a very narrow passage of water, and they're going to defeat the fleet here. So Spartans are angry. They burn Athens. The Athenians, who are not there, have moved to safety. And the armies of Athens, they lure the Persians over into this area where they then defeat the Persian fleet. The following year, the Greeks defeated the Persians on land in Asia Minor and marked the end of the Persian invasion. So eventually the Persians are just going to be like, okay, enough's enough. Like, what do we do? They not only have defeated us in every kind of battle this way when we've brought it to them, they've now defeated us here in Asia Minor. They've come over to this side and defeated us. So what are we supposed to do? How are we supposed to defend against that? Okay, so some of the results of this is Athens is going to emerge from this war as the most powerful city-state in Greece. Everybody recognizes it. Sparta knows it. Everybody knows that Greece is got really one major city-state, and it's the world power because they defeated the greatest military in the world. It's kind of like the United States. The United States, after the Revolutionary War, had beat England, and by beating England, they kind of took a huge role over the world military. And it's true of World War II when we defeated the Germans, the strongest military in Europe. It's kind of seen as being the most powerful country in the world. And when in the Cold War we beat the Russians or the Soviet Union, we are demonstrating our superiority in military. But there's some lessons we can learn from Athens about being this league. So first off, Athens is going to say, hey, we need to be together in this. They're going to create what's called the Delian League. This is an alliance with many Greek city-states joining together to make sure they can defend themselves from future invasions that could come from the Persians or others. This alliance is a formal agreement between two or more nations where they decide that they're going to cooperate and come to each other's defense. So, some city-state in Thermopylae or wherever decides that they're going to protect and defend Athens, and Athens says they're going to defend and to protect them. Now, Athens is like the United States when it comes to NATO. They are the largest empire in the league, okay? So they use that position to kind of be in charge and to kind of bully their way to getting things they want. So if we look here, this is part of the Delian League here. This right here is actual land owned by Athens. Okay? And there we go, Athene. There's the Athens right there. And these are different areas that are not owned by them, but are kind of like, loyal to them. They're garrisons, you can call them. There's like soldiers there that are protecting those areas. Now, these other groups are league members. They're part of the Delian League, and they are paying Athens money to help them. And then there's other groups in these yellow who are actually not only getting money to them, but are also building ships and doing other things to create a very strong military. And the idea is that if we're all in this together, if we all work together in this, then what we're going to do is we're going to be able to keep off the Persians or anyone else, okay? Now, compare that with Sparta. You have here, hopefully this little icon comes away here in a second. You have here the Spartan territory in this deep red, and then you have the Peloponnesian League, okay? So we're going to talk about the Delian League and the Peloponnesian League. The lighter pink is groups that belong to the Peloponnesian League, who are kind of in a check with Athens. So the Spartans don't like the fact that Athens is so strong. They don't like the fact that they are dominating this area in the Aegean Sea. So they're going to try to respond back by creating their own little league, their own little group, and having people pay them money and pay them to build things and everything else. So years after the Persian War, there's going to be this golden age of Athens. This is where we get some of the greatest minds, the greatest thinkers, the greatest inventions from the Greeks, okay? One of the greatest thinkers of all time in Athens is a man named Pericles. Pericles helped the economy thrive, and he helped make the government democratic. Now, a lot of people will say that Pericles is the father of democracy. He's the one that invented democracy and makes Athens into a democracy. You'll remember that Sparta is not a democracy at all. And this is from a time period of about 460 to about 429 BC. And this is called the Age of Pericles, when Pericles was helping the government and really making things strong and doing all sorts of things. So let's talk about a couple of the other things there, okay? First off, Periclean Athens was a direct democracy. Now, we'll compare that with an indirect democracy. Direct democracy means literally the people are all voting. So you have everybody comes together and everybody votes. Where an indirect democracy, much more like the United States, is, yes, we're a democracy as far as the majority of the people generally make what the rules are in the country. However, we're an indirect in that, like, not literally every single person votes. On every single issue, and they're not always making those decisions, right? So under this system, there's a large number of citizens who take direct part in everyday life in Athens. There is 6,000 members that have to be present to decide issues. So this is a lot of planning and a lot of people in one area that makes it very difficult to actually get things done, right? Pericles believed that all the male citizens should take part in government. It was your civic duty to be part of that. And they should be paid a stipend or a fixed salary to be in office. So at some point in time in your life, you're not going to be a politician forever, but if you were from the right family, you would probably at some point be in government, and you would get paid money to be so, but you wouldn't live the rest of your life in government. Athenians had juries, so like when there was a trial, they would have a jury that would then try their peers and would decide what was going to happen to them. A jury is a panel of citizens who have the authority to make the final judgment in a trial, right? So we have juries here in the United States. An Athenian jury might have hundreds or even thousands of jurors, but only males that were over the age of 30 could serve. So women, you never had jury duty. Men, you did, but only men that were over the age of 30 could actually serve on it. The idea is by the time you were 30, you had an understanding, you had a kind of a world life or experience that helped you make better judgments. Athenian citizens could vote to banish or send away a public figure whom they saw as a threat to this democracy. So thinking back to the old notes, who can you think of that was considered a threat to Greek democracy? Yeah, Socrates, right? Socrates was poisoning the youth, was destroying their minds, and so they had to get rid of him, right? That's going to be their viewpoint. This process is called ostracism. Ostracism, if you ostracize somebody, it means you don't pay them attention, you don't listen to them, you don't really have any interaction with them. Okay, that's called ostracism. And Socrates was given the option. He could be ostracized, or he could commit suicide or die by drinking hemlock. It was his choice. So let's talk a little bit about the funeral oration. Pericles is going to give this speech at the funeral of an Athenian slain in battle. He's going to be at this great speech talking, right? He's going to emphasize in his speech that Athens' power rested in the hands of not of a minority, but as a whole people. So this is kind of a dig at Sparta. He's going to say, this isn't like a couple people in charge, right? It's not like I'm in charge. It's you are in charge. And people really like this message. And this is what people like about democracy is this, it sounds good when the people are in charge of things, when they get to decide. And this makes people really kind of excited. His speech is considered one of the earliest and greatest expressions of democratic ideals. It's one of the best early speeches in favor of a democratic system. So let's talk about the economic and cultural life of the Athenians. Athens prospered during this age with Pericles. Pericles turned Athens into this cultural city of learning. So much learning, so much growth, so much greatness came from this time period. But eventually all things are going to come to an end. Many Greeks outside of Athens resented their domination. They kind of like the United States, like we're the biggest dog, and sometimes when you are, people resent that, even though it might even benefit them. To counter the the Delian League, I should say, Sparta created the Peloponnesian League, like we already showed you on that map, right? And while Sparta encouraged oligarchy, Athens supported democracy. So these people are very different from each other. Sparta thinks that you have to have a couple kings in charge. If you don't, people will make bad choices on their own. Where Athens thinks that people are generally good and that they'll make the right decision if given the option. In 431 BC, warfare is going to break out between Athens and Sparta, and this is where we're going to start to see the very beginning of the Peloponnesian War. The war is going to last actually for 27 years, so it's a long-lasting war. So here we look at the Athenian League. This is kind of a nice way to see it, this orange, and the Spartan allies. And these are going to be the ones that are fighting back and forth with each other, right? And I think it's important you see the red dots, because it helps you understand that, yes, Greece is much bigger than what you may have thought. There's this, Amphipolis, there is Plataea, there's Thebes, there's Corinth, there's Sparta, there's Melos, Delos, Athens, right? These are all major cities, so it helps you understand how big Greece was. Here's another map that just kind of shows another example. This one I like just because it shows kind of like the neutrals in it, the ones that were not kind of dedicated to fighting. What we're going to find is that this war becomes very bloody because it's Greek versus Greek. Yes, it's Athenian versus Spartan, but at the end of the day, they're both Greeks. Athens is going to face this geographical disadvantage with Sparta since it's located inland, meaning if you look at the map again, Athens, the problem here, is they have to go and march inland to Sparta, right? It's a march for them. They have to go down to it. It's not nearly as bad as what Sparta can. Regardless, if you're from Athens and you sail, you still have marching to go up to. Or if you're from Sparta, the nice thing is you can land and be right in Athens almost at any point in time. Sparta only had to march north to attack the Athenians. They didn't have to do much else. When Sparta invaded Athens, Pericles allowed the people from the surrounding countryside to move inside the walls, meaning, there's a city-state with these big walls. The people that they didn't all live in the city itself in Athens. They lived in the countryside. So now Pericles is going to say, hurry, come into the city wall so we can protect you from the Spartans. But the problem with this is it's a lot of people. It's a lot of overcrowding. Pericles is going to die because of a plague that's going to happen, which totally makes sense. The more people you have living together, the more likely you can spread disease to one another, right? And this is going to cause power struggles to Athens. So instead of Athens being this very united city-state like it had been before, now you have people all competing to be the one in charge with Athens. One thing that's important to realize is that both sides commit terrible, horrible things against one another. Sparta is going to eventually ally themselves with Persia, and Sparta is going to capture Athens in 404 BC. So the Persians are going to be able to get the revenge they want to because they hated the Athenians anyway, and they're going to be able to do it with the Spartans. Okay, so let's talk about the aftermath here. The Peloponnesian War ends, the Athenian domination of the Greek world also ends with it. The Athenian economy does not recover, and Athens becomes really... it never becomes the great cultural center it had been before. We'll never see Socrates coming from there again. We'll never see the money coming from there, or Pericles, or any of those great, great leaders. For the next century, what you're going to see is a bunch of continuous fighting between the Greeks. Sparta is going to finally suffer a defeat at the hands of Thebes. So this is another city-state that we saw on that map, right? And so it's not the Athenians that are able to defeat them, but it's another city-state called Thebes. And this is going to be the end of our notes here with the Peloponnesian War. So how does really the Greek world end? Really, it ends by a civil war. The Persians are the ones that deal the final blow to the Athenians. But ultimately, the war kind of comes to an end, and the Greeks really never get their power and prestige like they had before because they lose their own ability to work together. They are so busy fighting and killing each other, they're not able to withstand their enemies. So let's review our objectives here. Objective 1, what was the Persian Wars over? You remember that it was over Darius. He's furious at Athens for a couple reasons. One, they killed his messengers that were there coming to get taxes. There's really 3 reasons. 1, he's mad because they do that. 2, he's mad that they won't pay their taxes. 3, he's mad that they are helping the Ionian rebellions against the Persians. So he doesn't like any of those things. It's kind of like our dislike for Iran. Iran supports a group called Hezbollah, a terrorist organization, and we really don't like Iran for that reason, do we? We kind of resent the fact that they're giving money to people who want to see us hurt. How did the Greeks defend themselves over the Persian Wars? Well, one of the big things that they did was they fought together. They were unified together. Okay, so that's an important aspect there. Another thing is they built up a large navy, okay? And the last thing is the strategies they used. Remember how Athens left the city empty, and then how they went back and lured them into a strait so they could defeat them. This is an example of the strategies that Athens used to defeat the Persians, and they were very, very successful. And what is the Peloponnesian War about? Remember, the Peloponnesian War was in an effort for the Peloponnesian League to attack the Delian League. Delian League is made up of Athens and other city-states, while the Peloponnesian League is made up of Sparta. This is a war between those 2 major superpowers of Greece, and it really ends with Athens and Sparta both being destroyed. So that's the end of our notes there. Hopefully you got those objectives. If you have any questions about them, let me know. Thanks so much, guys.